So today I am here with my January wrap up. With my February wrap up, not January. We are now on the third month of the year. It's now March. Okay, let's try again. Hi and welcome back to The Books Are Everywhere. I am here with my February wrap up. I think I read 12 books in February, if my maths is correct. I think I read 12, which is pretty good for me. It's like still around average, but it's the higher end, and I am now nearly a quarter of the way through my reading goal for the year, which I feel like is a very nice place to be. Only a couple of months into the year, and I'm quite a few books ahead of my schedule as well, which is quite nice. I'm like 6 or 7 books ahead of schedule, which is cool. But anyway, I think I read 12, but we will find out over the course of this video. So let's dive right in to everything that I read in February, not January. So the first one that I read, which I still own, it's just on the top of this bookcase, was Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo and Kit Seaton, I think, and Louise Simonson. I think one is the author, one is the translator of the narrative into a graphic novel, one is the illustrator, but I might be wrong there, but they all worked on this book. And this is the graphic novel version of the DC Icons Wonder Woman Warbringer, which is a novel by Leigh Bardugo, which is also on the top of this bookshelf. Anyway, with that little bit of background behind us, obviously this is a Wonder Woman story, and this is part of the DC Icons universe, which there are graphic novels and novels set in the DC Icons world, following different superheroes. And I think they all have novels and graphic novels. I know definitely Catwoman and Wonder Woman both have graphic novels, so I'm going to presume the other ones do as well. And this is following Wonder Woman before she's Wonder Woman, so she's Diana, Princess of the Amazons. I liked this one, but I honestly feel like a lot of it went over my head. So reading these DC Icons books is proving to be quite an interesting experiment because I have such little background knowledge of the DC universe. I really don't know a lot about it, and I feel like this definitely did go over my head a bit. I am currently reading the Catwoman novel, which is part of the same series. As I said, I think there's graphic novels and there's full-length novels, and I'm finding that one a lot better. So I think part of my problem with this is that I probably need to read the novel version first and then reread this graphic novel, and hopefully it will sink in a bit more, because I honestly just found myself kind of turning off, and I wasn't a massive fan of the scratchy art style as well. So I did enjoy it, but it was definitely a like and not a love, because honestly I just need to read it when I have more background knowledge, and it's one that's a bit hard to judge because I don't have that. So I'm giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. And the next one I read was Small by Hannah Moffat, and this one was such a cute kids book. Honestly, I actually really enjoyed it. I think it's upper end of 5 to 8, lower end of middle grade 9 to 12, because it is mostly kind of jam-packed with illustrations, and it's following our main character, who is a small in a world of giants, or at least there is a lot of mythical beings in this world, and one of them are giants, and the main character's mom has told him he has to go to a giant school, and it was honestly so much fun. I read this over a day or so, and it was a lot more entertaining than I expected. I got quite drawn into the story, and reading about this kid who is a small among giants and trying to masquerade as a giant was funny, entertaining. It was written in a brilliant way, and also the illustrations were great as well. I got very pulled into the story, and it has some really lovely morals as well, and it just gave a lot more than I expected it to, so I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars in the end, but for the age category I'd definitely give it a 4.5. I then read Welcome to St. Hell, My Trans Teen Misadventure by Lewis Hancock, and this was absolutely brilliant. This is a graphic novel memoir following Lewis Hancock as a teenager. It's basically following Lewis talking to his younger self as they kind of grow up and go through this gender affirming journey, and they are kind of struggling with the world as they are realising that they don't fit into they're not in the right body growing up. And I really wondered how this would translate to being a graphic novel, as it's obviously a very heavy topic, but I thought it was really, really well handled. I didn't know how easy it would be to follow when the main character was actually talking to his younger self, but it was brilliant. It was easy to follow. It was done in like this humorous, light-hearted tone, but obviously does discuss these really, really heavy, difficult subjects. And it honestly left me with like goosebumps all over me because it was just so raw and honest and emotional and brilliantly written. I think Lewis is really kind of opening up his heart for this story, and it was just so well done. I couldn't give it any less than 5 stars. I then read Nura and the Immortal Palace by M.T. Khan, and this one was enjoyable, but it did also kind of go over my head a bit. I think there was something about it, I don't know why, that I took quite a while to get into the story, and I wanted it to be this really like atmospheric and all-encompassing book, and I just didn't really feel that involved. It definitely is really atmospheric. It's a middle grade fantasy who is following a girl called Nura as she goes through life as like a miner. She's working as a mica miner in these mines in real world Pakistan, and then she's dragged into the world of the jinn as she follows her friend into the world of the jinn, and it becomes this obviously very fantastical, magical tale. It was enjoyable. I just feel like I wanted it to be more. I wanted to be more captivated. I wanted it to be more encompassing, more captivating, and I always kind of felt like I was a little bit of an outsider. And I think for the age group, like, 'cause it's a middle grade book, it's 9 to 12, for the age group I feel like it's really important that fantasy is enthralling. So I think there was something that kind of let me down a little bit there, but I did still enjoy it. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I then read The Book of Stolen Dreams by David Farr, which again is a middle grade fantasy. This one was very interesting because it's following these 2 kids who are brother and sister, and they live in this very grey, dreary world under the rule of this like prime minister president figure who is Charles Melstane. And this president leader basically doesn't like children, and their worlds are quite oppressed. Their librarian father then enlists them to help steal this book, and then finds that he is captured, leaving the kids on their own, and they end up kind of being dragged into this world with this book. They're like trying to keep it a secret, but also their father has told them to like meet somebody, so they're kind of traveling, and they end up being split up, and they know they have to try and keep this book out of the president leader's hands. It was really interesting. It kind of reminded me of like The Shadow of the Wind, but for kids. There was just something kind of atmospheric about it in the same way. It's a book about books in the same way, and also has these like undertones. Like it was not what I expected from a middle grade, because it had these really dark undertones of this like evil leadership, like this cruel leadership, which I didn't really expect, but was very interesting to read about. I just kind of wondered how it would translate to kids, because I found it hard to follow at times, let alone children. Like, it was really interesting, and it definitely captivated me more than I kind of expected it to. But I don't know, there was just something that I felt like it was quite in depth, and it was also very long. I feel like it was about 400 pages. It was nearly 400 pages, and I just felt like it didn't keep my attention for the whole time. I'm thinking about judging it for that age group. I feel like it definitely would have gone over my head at that age, but I didn't really read a lot of fantasy. I would be interested to see how kids find it if they are fantasy readers, and maybe like they would be okay with it, and I'm kind of just judging on my own thoughts and feelings and what I think I would have enjoyed at that age, which is hard. But there was great things about it. I just think some of it missed a little bit, so I gave it 3 stars. I did still like it, I just didn't love it. I then read a couple of romance books, starting with X's and O's by Amy Lee, which is the second book in a series, although they are kind of companion novels, because I think the first book is Set It Off and I actually haven't read it, so I definitely am not reading this as a series. And this is following Tara Chen, who is a booktuber, or like kind of does bookstagram stuff kind of. But it was interesting to read about that. She does like live shows, and it was really interesting to have that. But basically she has had her heart broken many a time, and she ends up kind of going back to all of her exes, and this is following her as she goes back to each of her exes to go on a date with them and see if there is a second chance romance there. But she also enlists the help of her roommate, who is, can't remember his name, Trevor, who is a fireman, and they spend a lot of time together obviously, because they live together, they are roommates, and things happen. This was just so cute. Like, I fully accept that romance, the type of romance that I have been reading recently, is incredibly cliche. There's a lot, and this like full on faces facts, because it talks about, like, she is a romance reader in the books, it talks about tropes. It talks about tropes in romance books, like, a lot, so it really kind of is a bit, it faces those kind of things that we might be thinking about this book. It's a guilty pleasure. Like, I don't care that I enjoy it. If I want to enjoy reading, I may as well read books that I like, that I want to read on, that I feel captivated by, and romance is kind of doing it for me at the moment. Like, I just, even though they're highly predictable, I still want to know what's going to happen, and I still find myself being probably more enthralled with a romance book than I am with any others right now. So I really, really enjoyed this. It was cheesy, it was cliche, but it was highly entertaining. I loved the characters and I wanted to read on, so I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I then decided I enjoyed that so much I would go on to another romance, and I read Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I read The Love Hypothesis last year and loved it a lot more than I expected, so I thought, why not finally go into Ali Hazelwood's second novel? And I really enjoyed this. Again, I was very captivated, I wanted to read on. It was, yeah, it was great. It was a fun time. It was very entertaining. Again, full of tropes, and some of the stuff in here is very cliche, but I can't help but love it. So Ali Hazelwood, as you probably all know, writes books about women in STEM who often meet a surly, grumpy guy who also works in the same lab as them. And in this one, we are following Bee as she goes to this, she works basically in like a department of NASA developing this like helmet thing, and Levi is her grad school enemy, who ends up being her boss, kind of boss, superior I would say, but also Bee runs a Twitter account called What Would Marie Curie do? And there is just so many parts of this book that are like underlying mystery that I didn't really expect. It made me want to read on. I was listening to the audiobook, just like with The Love Hypothesis. I ended up reading it physically because I didn't want to put it down, and I loved it. It was great, and I feel like I'm definitely in my romance era. I didn't quite enjoy this as much as The Love Hypothesis, I don't think, but I feel like not much can top it because it was my first kind of foray into adult romance that I really, really enjoyed. So I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars as well, but highly, highly enjoyed this one. I then picked up The Garden of Words by Makoto Shinkai, and the art is by Midori Motohashi, and this is a, as I said, Makoto Shinkai manga. There is also a film or short film, I'm not 100% sure. I feel like it's also a light novel as well, if Makoto Shinkai is anything to go by. Like, he does tend to do graphic like manga and light novels and films. Everything, really. But yeah, I read this one. This is the first time I've actually come across this story, and it was interesting. I definitely enjoyed it, and it had a lot of the undertones that Makoto Shinkai's work always does. However, I can't not say this was a bit problematic, because this is essentially following a student and teacher as they meet on a park bench every time it rains, and I think they kind of bump into each other, and then every time it rains they just are drawn back to this place and back to each other. It was beautiful, and I did really like it, and it also does face the problems in the text itself. Like, they do discuss the fact that they are aware that she is a teacher and he is a student. She's not necessarily his teacher, but I get the impression that he is very young. He is like 16, and they are kind of falling for each other. And I don't know, it was just a bit like the undertones were a bit... I couldn't get on board with the story all the time, because I don't know, it's a very difficult subject, and I think it's a very personal subject as well, and I think the fact that it does kind of face up to the fact they know there is an issue means that it has obviously been thought about, and we don't necessarily have to sympathise with these characters to enjoy the story. But there was undertones that made me uncomfortable. That's probably the easiest way to put it, because even though they obviously don't necessarily know that they are linked in this way, he is a lot younger than her and is, I think, 16, and I think that's the point where I'm like, I don't know if I can get on board with this. So I'm giving this one 4 out of 5 stars because I did still really enjoy the story, and I really love Makoto Shinkai's work and writing, and I think being back in like one of his stories, I can't really say that I didn't enjoy that, because I did. But and it's a very hard one to judge, because it does also face facts in the text, and it does face up to the fact that this is an issue. So I don't really want to mark it down too much for that, because I don't think it's done blindly or without consideration. So I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And the next one I read was The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie, and this is the first book in the Pyro series, or collection if you will. So it's the first book where Pyro is the investigator, and it was really interesting to read this one. This is following a kind of gathering at a old stately home mansion type place, and one of the characters is poisoned. The like wife of the family is poisoned, and it's just kind of following Pyro and the other characters as he tries to find out who poisoned her. Very interesting. I don't often go into these feeling like I want to suss out who the murderer is. I just kind of am there for the ride and go along with it. But I found this one really interesting, going into this story as Poirot's first and one of Agatha Christie's first books as well. And I always really like the settings when it's kind of isolated within this one space, like the house. It obviously doesn't really go too much outside of that as well, and there's not too many characters to try and follow. It's fun. I'm definitely getting into them as I read more Christie, and I'm giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next one I read was Bingo Love by T. Franklin, and this one is also a graphic novel, as you can see. This is one I bought for Courtney because she's wanted it for so long, and as soon as she read it she said, you need to borrow it and read it yourself. So I did, and I can see why she handed it straight back to me, because it was beautiful and I loved it so much. It's a very quick read because it is a graphic novel and it's very, very thin. I think it's only about, I can't remember, there's not page numbers in here, so I don't know, but it was just stunning. It's following these two girls in 1963, so they're Hazel and Mary, and they fall in love at church bingo, break up because of pressure from their families because they're gay and that's looked down upon, and then reunite 50 years later when they are both married and have families. So it was very emotional, it was very heartbreaking but heartwarming, and I can see why Courtney said she teared up within the first couple of pages, because it does get very emotional very quickly. It's very raw and heartfelt, and I feel like it does discuss these really difficult topics in a way that you can't help but really feel for the main characters and really love them and root for them. And I just thought it was so well done, beautifully illustrated, beautifully written, and I was, yes, very happy to finally read this story, because it's one I've heard a lot about over the years, and yeah, it's very hard to come by in this country, but I'm glad that I did come across one and that me and Courtney have now both read it. There is a lot of people credited in this, so I'm just going to leave this here for a second so you can see who worked on everything in this, because I love that they've included this. There's a lot of people to read out, so here is all of the people who've worked on Bingo Love. And the last one I read in the month of February was Over My Dead Body by Sweeney Boo, and this is another graphic novel that was lent to me by my friend Amy, and Joe also read it and then they kind of passed it on to me. And this is a dark academia book set in a magic school, and it's following our main character as one of her friends goes missing, and the friendship group basically tries to track down this friend. I cannot emphasize enough how beautiful this book is. The artwork in here is absolutely stunning, and I would happily have most of it on my wall. And I feel like that was probably my favourite part of the book itself, was the colour scheme, the artwork, the illustration, just absolutely beautiful. This one is a much thicker graphic novel, but I still got through it over the course of an evening, and I feel like it was quite very atmospheric, perfect cozy read for like autumn, I would say, if you wanted to pick this one up. And it was just really, really beautiful. I definitely feel like some of it has fallen out of my brain since I read it only a few days ago, which is the thing that is kind of laying it down, but it was very enjoyable when I was actually reading it. I did like the characters and the friendship group, and I loved the atmosphere and the story. I think the atmosphere and the drawings and the colour and stuff is probably my favourite part of it. But overall, I did really enjoy this one, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And if I didn't say, Bingo Love got 5 out of 5 stars without question. So I've just gone through and counted, and I actually have 11 instead of 12, but I know I only read or counted 10 books in January. So I think I am missing one out of these 2 wrap-ups, and from what I can tell, that book is Drama and Danger, The Lizzie and Belle Mysteries by TJ Williams. So I'm going to quickly mention that here because I don't think I read it I don't think I talked about it in my January wrap-up, and that gets me up to 12, which is what I thought I'd read in this month. So this one is a middle grade mystery following these 2 girls in the Victorian era. So it follows these 2 girls, Lizzie and Dido Bow, and it also follows Lizzie's family predominantly. So Lizzie's dad is, I think, one of the first black men to be in a production on the West End. If it's on the West End, I think it is. Honestly, I'm trying to remember like all of the technicalities of this book, but the ins and outs of everything. But I think he's one of the first black men to be on the West End or in theatre, and he's in a production for Othello, and he has an attempt on his life on stage, or as like part of the production. So Lizzie and Belle are basically trying to find out what happened to him. So it's kind of following them as they uncover this mystery, but also follows some really important themes of being black in the Victorian era in London, which I really didn't expect it to discuss this in like such an approachable way for the age that it was written for, because this is a 9 to 12 mystery. And I thought that was really interesting to read about. And there was a lot that I really enjoyed about this book. I listened to the audiobook of it, and I did find it quite interesting and quite entertaining and quite enthralling. Like, I did want to find out what was going to happen, and I think this is going to be the start of a series as these 2 girls uncover more mysteries in Victorian London, which I can see really appealing to a lot of the age category that it's written for. So I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, I think that's actually all of the books that I read or finished in February. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and hearing about all of the books that I read over the course of the month, and I will see you next time in another video. Bye.